You unlock this benefit with the key of Patreon. Beyond is another dimension. A dimension of thought. A dimension of speculation. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both waffle and substance. Of things and ideas. You've just crossed into the podcast zone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Trekking Through the Twilight Zone. We are at the end of Season 2. And I just want to stand up and say I am not obsolete at this point. I have a purpose. We are doing the final episode, and Burgess Meredith is back. Always glad to see a bit of Mickey. But yeah, this is the Obsolete Man. Julie, do you want to give a quick synopsis of this episode?
Well, Burgess Meredith plays. We're in a sort of fascist state. And Burgess Meredith is put on trial for being obsolete, and he confesses he's a librarian, which is since books have been banned, doesn't exist anymore. And so he's found to be obsolete. He's defiant, and he's given the opportunity to choose the method of execution and the time. Prior to his decided upon time, the chancellor who tried him, we're not sure chancellor of exactly what. Is he the boss of everything? He doesn't seem to be, but okay, goes to visit Burgess Meredith and finds out Burgess Meredith has locked the door just with a key. Nobody's coming to open the door from outside, apparently. And his choice of execution method is bomb. And so, therefore, the chancellor's going to die. Not only is there a sort of anti-fascist overtone to this, but there's also a explicitly Christian overtone, as Burgess Meredith is a believer, reads his Bible, and gets the chancellor to say, "In the name of God, let me go," and break down. And then he opens the door, and it's sort of proof that, in times of crisis, you'll really cry out for the Lord.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a kind of, I mean, it's problematic, but this is a kind of classic sort of mid-century short play kind of episode. And I quite like it, but it does have these problematic elements. What are your thoughts?
I like it. I enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed its setup. I enjoyed the structure of it. I even enjoy the theist nature of it to an extent. So this setup that Burgess Meredith's kind of librarian sets up. This this notion at the end where he says, look, they've got this countdown to when the bomb's going off. It's like a 40-minute or a 20-minute window. And he says, well, how will you spend your final minutes? I'm gonna read my Bible. Like this is the most illegal object I own right now, and I can enjoy. What you're gonna do to me, sort of thing. I'm gonna die, so I'm gonna sit and read my Bible and commune and connect with my God before I die. What are you gonna do? And so I like the sort of the ideas in it. As in, I like the fact they're going to talk about these ideas. However, I have real problems with this idea that sort of this idea of this fascist dictatorship that they acknowledge goes further than Hitler and Stalin is inevitably atheist and science driven, and that is bad. Like there's this huge bad stuff, this big flashing neon sign that's sort of like atheist equals fascist sort of thing. It's sort of like I really have problems with that.
And that's not, I mean, let's just say that's not historically true.
No, most definitely not.
Whatever
Hitler's
the other
way, but
exactly, and whatever Hitler's private beliefs, nobody was a bigger ally and partner to Hitler than the Catholic Church, which they don't want to admit. And let's keep in mind that the tie between theism, between religion and totalitarianism went back to ancient times. The king was the leader of the church. I understand there's a country that you're familiar with where that's technically still the case. This is fucking antiquated, and it's part of a totalitarian mindset. And, in fact, that unity is so great that the great book on dictatorship in the Soviet Union is called The God That Failed, right? Because even to have a totalitarian state is to imitate what religion inevitably tries to do. So, right,
Yes.
with that said, I'm not horrified by, the depiction of Christianity here. But let's not forget,
No.
it is murderous.
He was always, the thing is, I would say he was always going to let him go. Although actually, when you do the timings, like the chancellor barely gets down the stairs before the bomb actually goes off and stuff. So I don't know actually. Now I say that. One of the things I find that's interesting about this episode is this idea of obsolescence. Though there's no retraining, there's no filling of gaps, there's no upscale and whatever. It's you were a librarian, or you confess to being a librarian, so you are obsolete. You've been seen to be obsolete, and they even say later on when they go to his apartment that he's a carpenter. But he didn't reach the level to which he would be accepted by the state. And you're like, all right, well, I'm pretty sure there's still odd jobs that he could be doing to fix things. Like, you don't need to be a master carpenter to do odd jobs with woodwork. So you've even sort of started to sort of like break up your own argument. But I find it, this idea of obsolescence is just so. They're trying to take it to the extreme, aren't they? That's the point of this dictatorship. And again, when the chancellor is challenged on this, he actually says, like, we had precursors that went so far, but we sort of learned from them and went further. And they actually say, like, Hitler, Stalin, and stuff. And then he lists off. He says, yeah, the disabled, the sick, the elderly, we got rid of them all. They're just a burden, and da da da. But it's almost like they're trying to sort of highlight this logic, like, well, these are the burdens on society, and so we need to grow and stuff. But one of the things I think this episode is missing, and it's why one of the things that really annoyed me about it strawmans the fascist state. And I'm not saying that I want this fascist state to be sort of like this paragon of virtue, all this thing, but the opposite, the virtue, the argument is completely strawmanned. This thing of God and having this sort of like this spirituality is they're sort of going, well, it's the right thing to do and it makes you a better person. You are sort of spiritual and there is a God and you can't get rid of God and you can't take God out. And there's this whole speech he has, and I was just like, this is such utter shit.
Absolutely.
And so that was my main problem with it. That it doesn't give the other side the chance to give a proper, philosophical stance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of two minds about this because I do think it's a sort of classic anti-totalitarian sort of episode. I mean, I like the sets. I mean, it's a little cliche, the shadowy room with the very tall stand and long table, but it still works,
Yeah.
And I quite like a lot that's going on in this episode in that sort of classic sense. But the religion stuff, it doesn't bother me that it's there. I think that especially in this era, a lot of especially Cold War rhetoric was couched in not just patriotic but religious terms. If Christianity really were about in practice about the liberty of the individual and whatnot, it would be perhaps easier to swallow. But you're right, there are these moments, and even when Burgess Meredith is being tried, he says, oh yes, there is a God, and he does not like disappear because you believe in him. You fail to believe in him. And of course the chancellor says, the state has proven there is no God. Well, first of all, atheists don't go around and say, we've proven there is no God. The burden of proof is not on the person who doesn't believe in a genie in the sky, right?
I love that. It's like, you can't prove something's non-existent. So that's not how it works. So that's what, So that made me chuckle actually when I heard that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little silly.
Yeah, and I agree. So, no, but sorry, you were going to go. Was there anything else you were going to say on that? 'Cause it just,
No,
yeah,
just that, I mean, it does continue that. I mean, I'm not sure why his occupation is a librarian if clearly books
yeah,
are banned, right? Like, so what does that mean? Is that more a hobby? But I do think this Bible thing, it reminds me of how he reads the Bible at the end. Okay, I believe in freedom of religion, right? I mean,
mm,
if by all means, have your Bible and read it. I don't think it's a path to truth, but if you do, good on you. Um, but he says, of course, this is the most banned thing. That's hard to imagine, but okay. But it also reminds me of the Christian martyrs and this sort of like cult of death aspect of
yeah,
Christianity, where it's such a good thing to go to your death cheerfully. And if I go to my death cheerfully and I'm confident of my reward in heaven, that is seen as some kind of proof that this religion that I believe in is real. Never mind that Muslims and Hindus and tons of other people do this, go to their death cheerfully in the exact same way. This cult of martyrdom that is very sort of sick. And then the idea that this chancellor cries out to God to be spared is somehow seen as evidence that, see, God wins, right? As if you couldn't be desperate to get away and want to preserve your life quite correctly and be willing to lie or say what's necessary to get out because you're an animal and you want to live. But that's somehow seen as evidence for, aha, see, God exists. He cried out for him at the end. I mean, there is I don't want to put too strong a point on this, but there is a sort of coercive, sort of evil sort of lever at work there.
Oh no, I agree. I mean, well, the whole point of this execution, we should. There's a really important point actually as well. This is being broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
This is being televised. So it's not just a private conversation. This is being broadcast to whoever, I don't know, whatever this American or totalitarian state covers, whatever it is. It's been broadcast, and that's clearly the point of what this librarian wants, is to make this point of, well, everybody cries to God at at their moment of death. And I go, yeah. And again, that's why, these conversations, they want to, if you really want to explore this, have the discussion both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Have it where you have the librarian saying, well, I believe in an afterlife, and I believe that I've done everything good in life, and I will be welcomed into the kingdom of heaven, and I will stand, the left right hand of God, or whatever it is that they believe, right? Fine. And again, have that conversation where he basically lays that out, and that's why he is comfortable in this moment to become this martyr, to die. But then, if you want to have the full logical atheist explanation of the side, you need almost like the chancellor is shown to be weak and petty, isn't he? That's the point. He's meant to be sort of. But in order for this to work, you almost need someone who's the equal of the librarian to be saying, like, yeah, no, I am scared of death. I don't want to die. This could be a pain. This explosion doesn't guarantee death. I could just end up being blown out of a window. Like, I don't know if this is going to work. I could be maimed and mutilated, but it can be painful. But I also know that, I'm also worried that if I die, I have a wife and child, and in me dying, they will be left destitute. So you're right. I don't want to die because there is a function that I have to serve to continue this populace and to continue to support my family. You are taking that away. More than that, however, if I die, I know that I will be taken and, I don't know, let's use the Judge Dredd sort of like mega city thing. My body will be taken to the recyc, and my body will then be used for whatever purpose. Soylent Green.
Soylent Green.
Yeah. There's that thing of like having that logical thing of going like, but I believe that's it. So once I die, there's no more pain, there's no nothing. So I want them to have that theist, conversation. And there isn't one. And so it's quite clear that there isn't intended to be one. It's supposed to be, he is pious and therefore sort of like, open to this thing. He is accepting his demise, whilst sort of like, the fascist or totalitarian atheist is sort of scared of death. Again, it's sort of, it just, you said that leverage, that hook, sort of like to spring this on someone as well, sort of in the way he does. It sort of, I don't know. It doesn't work in the way I think they think it works.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't not work either, right? I
No,
mean,
no, yeah.
it's a decent play. I mean, I get what it's doing, but right, you're right. It's not aware of its own implications. Um, and I mean, or of the sheer murderous element here. I mean, the it's not aware of the evil there, and I think it wants to say, well, he's never going to let him die anyway. But right, as you point out, the timing doesn't work. He clearly barely got out, and if you fumble with that key in the keyhole for one more second, he's dead. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's cutting it a bit close. Even if you say you were on top of it, mistakes happen that delay things, especially under stress. I mean, and not to throw in yet another very minor nitpick. And again, I like this episode, but yes, you get to choose your method of execution, but you seem to be in an apartment complex, and maybe setting off a bomb in an apartment complex is not safe for everyone.
No, I was curious about that. I was going to raise that. I'm glad you mentioned it because that was in my notes. Like, it's clear he even says it's his apartment, and there's this flight of stairs he's got to go up to get to this apartment. So yeah, and they're like, oh, we're going to allow any form of execution, and like, so what? Even structurally damaging a building where other people live, like, that seems really irresponsible for a sort of like a logical state. Like, there should have been, like, we're going to move you to a cell or an isolated cell or something. It felt really bizarre, that one. Yeah, I get why, because they want to have it in. Yeah, they need him in his home, but why not have like a gas canister? This is going to release a poison gas.
Good point.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you, and I think that it's a good episode, and as an anti-fascist episode, it is satisfying and pretty good. I do think that it's interesting. The episode before it mentioned Ray Bradbury as they were in the diner.
Yes.
And this one is because, of course, that was referencing the Martian Chronicles, just because it's a Martian, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here, it's very clear this is influenced by Fahrenheit 451 to me, with its burning of books and whatnot. So, I mean, and obviously, as an anti-fascist statement, it makes sense that the tables are turned, right? And the fascist chancellor winds up being tried by his own, people, and he seems just a two-dimensional character who's obsessed with his own power and privilege. But you're quite right that he needs to have some kind of voice, right? It needs to be not quite this two-dimensional. And there are moments where I sympathize with the state. I mean, not necessarily liquidating everybody, but certainly, there is, I think I sympathize. I always sympathize with people who I feel are characters who I feel are not given adequate attention or given short shrift by the writer, because I always feel like the deck is stacked against them. But I also think there's a version of like, right, we're going to sort of control occupations a little, or not allow unlimited reproduction or things like this that I can sympathize with. I mean, he could say the world was chaos before we took over. I mean, there's no art. He just isn't given a voice at all.
No, and this is the thing. This is one of the things that whenever we have these usual sort of totalitarian regime takeovers, there's a given justification, isn't there? Even, I mean, this is something that we, watching Strange New Worlds, which is the new Star Trek show, they've sort of done it in that, about with the Federation coming about, was like, but there's this notion of chaos, again, going back to like Judge Dredd or whatever, like, there was the nuclear war, and out of the chaos came the judges. But you usually get that, don't you? Sort of like the fascist state, even in V for Vendetta, which is, would be another sort of similar thing to this, is this idea of sort of like, there was chaos, and out of that came this party that sort of brought Britain back from the brink. Sort of like, you have to have that sort of like in the situation, as we are seeing now. But But that's it. There's none of that, is there? There's no justification for why this is taking place. Why is it now an atheist or sort of like, non-theist sort of like society? Why is religion sort of been eradicated? Like, we don't know. So you don't get the context for it. So that's the first problem. And then you say you don't get this other thing. They just strawman the argument, where you're just like, oh, come on, at least give them something to have that. But again, coming back to the length of this, that room full of books. Because he's older, like this clearly didn't come around. This totalitarian state. This chancellor wasn't raised in this totalitarian state. Like he was obviously a kid at some other point. Like it would have been interesting to have him wandering the room. Like make it long again, like another episode where, and he picks up a copy of, I don't know, a classic, Huckleberry Finn, Treasure Island, something like that, and he's like, I read this as a kid. Like that thing of acknowledgement of like, there is a past. Like I see where these come from. Like just a softening of it. Give him some 2-dimension where he's almost like a regret of like, what is going on.
Yeah, there's some moral remainder that I see.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's there in Fahrenheit 451, right? Yeah. But that's not adapted here.
No, even the Christian Bale classic that is Equilibrium.
Oh yes. We've got to get to that masterpiece.
Oh, we will. Yeah, we'll get to Gun Carter. We so will. But even that has that same acknowledgement, doesn't it, of that the main character looking on these things and going like, "Is this right?" You need that. You need that moment of questioning. Like again, go back to Judge Dredd. Judge Dredd even did it. Like the character of Dredd even sort of questioned for a period in the late 80s, early 90s, questioned the system. And you need that moment in this where they do look at this and go, is this person right? And you don't get any of that. You don't get that sort of the nuance is lost because of the short time, I think, timescale.
No, I think you're right. And longer, I mean, even just as an hour episode, if as long as you really work that script and not make it feel like it could have been a half-hour episode, it could be really good. And, it would be so easy, like you said, to have this reference to, I remember reading Treasure Island as a kid. Also, like, if the chancellor said, well, I'm not unsympathetic to some of the things that you say. However, don't forget, one of the reasons why this state came into being was because of the Christian terrorists that it stopped, and then the main character could say, I don't think they represented good Christianity, but at least some reference to, it's not like force has only been used by the atheists. We were responding to something and we're still the bad guys. But I mean, you can at least have a conversation that's not black and white.
No, that'd be interesting. If you were to do that today, if this episode was to be done today, set it 15, 20, 25 years in the future, whatever you want to do, and have that where it is, you're not acknowledging the Christians, those Christian terrorists, those Methodist terrorists or whatever, forgive us anyone listening that we're not picking one out, but like that drove, that bombed so and so, like, or committed this atrocity in the name of their religion, like, go back, like, draw parallels.
We overthrew the Handmaid's Tale to create this, right?
Yeah, well, you've literally seen the Handmaid's Tale where they make the attacks on Congress and all sort of stuff, like, but yeah, exactly, like, yeah, this is another version of the Handmaid's. This is the opposite of the Handmaid's Tale, like they went the other way.
While you guys over there are doing V for Vendetta, we're over here doing the Handmaid's Tale, and
exactly,
yes. Sadly.
But I think, like, if you were to sort of have that and run parallels with, extreme Islamic terrorists, and be like, well, there's extreme Christian terrorists as well. Like, make it uncomfortable on both sides. Like, I don't want a clear-cut answer on this. Like, no, look, it's not complicated. It's not straightforward. It's not black and white. This isn't binary. The totalitarian regime clearly isn't right. However, there is a complete acknowledgement of the chaos that went before. But then, and the Christian provides this element of like, should we have spirituality and there's the right to religion and religious expression? Of course. But that does not mean that, as Lauren Boebert would have, the church guiding the state. So, I'd like to see that in a really nuanced way. So I like the fact this does that. At least alludes to it, but I think it falls way short. It is 90. I acknowledge this is 1961. I'm not commenting on a modern TV show. So even the fact that this is looking to do something of that in 1961, it just leans very heavily into that sort of the Christian martyrdom is a little frustrating.
I still like this episode. I still think this is a good episode. I do want to mention two things that are just personal annoyances. One is as he's reading, he reads the line, which is appropriate to this. The atheist, the fool has decided in his heart there is no God, which is repeated multiple times in the Bible. Which the only thing that proves is that there were atheists who knew this was bullshit back then in Stone Age time. Okay. Yeah. So, and how could you have that in a totalitarian culture where genocide against anyone who believes what you do was perfectly fine? That says a lot for, atheism, atheists having exactly the same strength of character as is displayed in this episode. Yeah. And the second thing is that this version, his version of Wordsworth's version of Christianity, has morphed into a kind of nebulous humanism, which can coexist in modern society, right? It's not a, murder anybody who's an infidel. It's not, all the hardcore stuff. It's, I want to read and have books and I believe in God. Awesome. Have at it, right? But it's worth pointing out this is a sort of nebulous, humanist, nice kind of very Protestant, wishy-washy version of Christianity. And I don't mean to say all Protestants are wishy-washy. I grew up in a Protestant culture, but
no, you're totally right. It is. This is he's basically C of E is what he is. He's Church of England. He's sort of like he lives in a lovely village in the home counties. Like that's the same. He wants to sort of be the eccentric that lives down the village and goes to church on a Sunday and loves his books. Like no problem in that. But again, it's those two extremes that it wants to explore. So I think you are right. One of the final things about the ending of this episode I wanted to just mention. So the Chancellor returns and he has been replaced and he has been found to be obsolete because he obviously called out to God in those final moments. And then basically in what can only be described as a scene that would be fitting for West Side Story, he is then confronted by two sides of the court who find that he is obsolete. Like they literally dance up to it, not dance, but I'm surprised they're not clicking their fingers as they do it. Like it really bothered me. However, it then ends. We talked about the last episode ending quite darkly. I mean, this episode has someone blowing themselves up, which I'm not sure could would fly today. I'm not sure how that goes, but it also ends with the entire this room of these logical, atheistic sort of like state officials ripping this person to shreds. They attack him and drag him over a table. And then, once on the floor, it just sort of it shows them sort of like this animalistic thing. I know that's the point. It's sort of like, but they just sort of like mob onto him, and that's sort of the end. And I was like, again, it goes back to this thing of like, I get you that you're trying to sort of show these to be the bad guys, and there's this sort of like, this you can't have morality without the Bible, and I get that. But it's so. It's so dark. Like even if you just had him marched away, of like, he needs to share the same fate. He needs to share exactly the same fate as the librarian Wordsworth. So this ending, this sort of like abstract ending, is such a sort of like a bit of a left turn. It really it bothered me a little bit.
I have the same feelings, and I love the shot of him being dragged down the long table. I love that shot so much, but I just have no idea what to think about this ending, and it strikes me as, so I don't even understand what's happening. You're talking about he sort of tries to flee, and these groups, converge on him very artificially, and then they abruptly start, attacking him. I literally just don't even understand what's happening. I think your explanation and objections are far more coherent than what we get. But you're right, it undermines the entire point, which should be parallelism to, you have fallen victim to the machines of the fascist state, the same way that you reveled in others falling victim. Except he's torn apart as if by, the furies, of ancient Greece or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where, again, and you've said this multiple times as we've gone through this. This was written in a week, or it was very quickly churned out, and it's one of those where you think, like, if they just had a second draft, or someone else cast their eyes over this and would say, like, can we just return to the ending? I just want to sort of go back and have this really hammer home this point instead. Like, I just think they would have worked better. Unless, like, maybe we're going to find out. I'm going to read a book sometime and find that, like, Rod Serling was some, like, majorly controlling monster that no one could approach to have anything change. Gene Roddenberry style. No, I'm not going to say that. That's all right. But yeah, no, it's just the ending is a bit of a disappointment in that sense, because it could be really neat and really nice and it does. It wants to sort of have something that's a bit more abstract, a bit more sort of, it's not ambiguous at all, because they literally tear them to pieces. But yeah, it doesn't work for me. Any final thoughts for the Obsolete Man?
I think we've said a lot, and I agree with everything you've said. I do want to say that what redeems this for me is the anti-totalitarian, humanitarian message. And for all of its faults, I love the closing narration, which is delivered by Serling himself on screen, which is unusual for the show. He clearly believes this, and the same humanitarianism has come out in other episodes when he says, and I quote, "Any state, any entity, any ideology which fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete." And you could tell he feels it. And if that is the core of what's being expressed here, despite all the faults that we've pointed out, amen.
Yeah, I agree with that. No, I hallelujah. I'd say. No, I agree. Like, it's clear. Like you say, the sentiment is fine. I agree. I think the sentiment is clear, and I think it is. I agree 100%. I think it's a bit compact, and unfortunately the packaging doesn't fully work. But the sentiment, the intent is clearly good. But for me, the other thing I would point out actually is, I sort of joked about it, but I think actually Burgess Meredith is really good in this. I like his performance. I think he has a wonderful voice. And so him sort of conveying some of the messages about books, and especially when he's on trial and stuff, he's being sort of like obtuse and a bit of like he's rebelling in sort of in the only way he can. Wonderful. Like, I really enjoy him in those scenes. He's absolutely fantastic. So that's really cool. And for this is an actor that I've only ever known as either like Mickey from Rocky or Batman, Penguin from Batman '66. So to see him in these episodes now, I'm really enjoying to see sort of this character actor that I've only seen in limited roles. He's wonderful in this. He is absolutely fantastic. So I really enjoyed it. It is a good episode. It's just one I'm finding with some of these later episodes, and we'll get into this in the next episode. Is going to be our season 2 wrap up. We will be doing some of the bits, but no, I'll cover this more in that. It's almost like they sort of, I think, because it's the runtime, they tap into an idea and they sort of run its course, but then because it's got to be entertaining. That's the main purpose of this. Obviously, and I accept that it's entertainment. That the entertainment sometimes ekes out a bit more time than the philosophical or the sort of or the thematic points, which I think could really do with some more time. Anyway, that's the end. This is it. This is the end of season 2. But we are not obsolete. This will keep going. As I say, we have got season 2 wrap up coming in the next episode, and then we have got some other things that we're going to be doing. We're going to be throwing some extras in there that Julian's going to find out. We had there was a sneaky backdoor pilot that I was unaware of that we are going to cover before we get to season 3, and then we will be getting into season 3. So we'll be getting to now. This is where I'm sort of I haven't looked at anything yet. I haven't sort of looked at the episodes, but I don't want to, because I like going into these fresh. So we'll just see what comes. But yeah, sneaky backdoor pilot will be coming before then.
Yeah, excellent. I
Anything
can't
else?
wait to keep going. I hope everyone is enjoying this trek through the Twilight Zone. And thank you if you're on Patreon for supporting us and helping to make this possible. We really appreciate it. Please, do anything you can to get the word out. We love doing this, and we would love to be able to keep doing this. And so, we really appreciate your support and anything you can do to spread the word, rate us online, whatever you can do to get that word out for us. So thank you so much for supporting.
Yes. Second that totally. We appreciate everybody and all our patrons. But anyway, for ladies and gentlemen, for now, that's been it's fantastic, and that's for season 2. But ladies and gentlemen, we shall see you on the season 2 wrap up.